Greetings, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of IPA in Conversation with. And today I have a special guest with me. Latoya West-Blackwood is here with us today. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Bodour Al Qasimi, Vice-President of IPA, and I'm honored to be hosting another interview with a special guest. Latoya is the chairman of the Book Industry Association of Jamaica. Before I ask Latoya questions, I just want to welcome her. Welcome, Latoya.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you here with us.
It's wonderful to be speaking with you.
Latoya, I'm looking at your bio and I'm really impressed with what you're doing. So I'm going to read a little bit
Sure.
about your background so that our guests can learn a little bit about you. Latoya West-Blackwood is the founder of I Publish Consultancy and its imprint Imagination Books, which focuses on works that promote cross-cultural understanding, gender equality, inclusion, and social justice. She's the chairman of the Book Industry Association of Jamaica, BIAJ, which biannually hosts the Kingston Book Festival. Under her leadership, the BIAJ has strengthened its work in the area of promoting reading and literacy as tools of personal development and national transformation, with a special focus in the areas of early grade reading and access to literature for all, particularly people living with disabilities. Latoya was a member of the National Consultative Committee of Latin America and Caribbean Reads, a U.S. aid-funded project implemented in Jamaica by EduConnect. LAC Reads has significantly contributed to the efforts to fill the research and knowledge sharing gaps in teaching and culturally relevant content development in early grade reading. She was recently recognized by the Yale School of Management Publishing course as the 2020 international recipient of its Innovative Leader Award in Book Publishing. In addition to her passion for reading, literacy, and general volunteerism, Latoya is a certified project management, Mona School of Business and Management, University of West Indies, Mona campus, a member of the inaugural class of Barack Obama's Young Leaders of Americas, 2016, founding member of the UX Exchanges Alumni Association, a British Council Creative Scotland and Edinburgh Festivals Momentum alumna, and the current chairman of Youth Crime Watch of Jamaica, a research-driven, youth-focused, non-governmental organization working with communities across the island on issues of violence, prevention, sustainable livelihoods, and integrity building. Wow, Latoya, you're amazing.
Oh boy.
What an impressive bio. You have really a great bio. Tell me a little bit about what got you into all of this.
Well, I would go back to I think the age of 5, which is it was a defining period I think in my life, if I'm to remember those early days. And I say that it was defining because in terms of connecting the work I do now to back then, it's the period in my life I can remember, falling in love with reading and books. And coming from a very humble background, working class family, I say that because books opened up a whole world for me that I didn't know existed. I didn't have the opportunity to travel at a very young age, and I would travel through the pages of my books. And so I understood that books, in a very real way, open doors for young people. And, the rest is really history from there. Just growing up in a family as well, where my mother, I saw her volunteering a lot. And I had a real understanding of how giving of your time and giving of your talents could help other people, right? So charity begins at home is literal, and it doesn't take for you to be extremely wealthy, or you can start by just being passionate about something and seeing how you can share that passion with everybody else. So in terms of everything you have just read, it all goes back to having that understanding from a very early age about the power of books and reading, and the power of one in terms of giving back. And so my life's work up to now has really been influenced by that. And I'm very grateful to, all my mentors and family and friends who have supported me on the journey, my colleagues to this point.
That's amazing. And, I love that you're interested in gender issues as well. And as a
Mm-hmm.
woman who's leading, the association in Jamaica, what was that like for you? Because I know in a lot of these associations that predominantly we don't see many women. So I just wanted
True.
to ask you about that. How did you rise to the challenge and get to where you are today? And did you feel there were any sort of roadblocks in your
Mm.
way?
Well, thanks for that question. And you don't see a lot of women who look like me.
Yes, yes,
I
exactly.
am I'm a black woman. I choose to wear my hair in locks, which is not, we're coming in my cultural context. Rastafarians at one point in time were not necessarily desirable company or people, because there was a lot of stigma in terms of how Rastafarians live. I'm not a practicing Rastafarian, but I choose to wear my hair like this because it currently defines my preference. But you know, it comes with a lot of things, and I also believe that I anything that I do, I understand that I am maybe an example or representation for a young girl, who probably is like me, looks like me, and so I take that very seriously. In terms of gender, our association was actually founded in 1989 by a very strong woman. So we had an awesome start. Her name is Shirley Carby, and she's actually the founder of one of the Caribbean's largest educational publishers, Carlong Publishers. And she did a lot of work setting up the foundation of the association. Back then, we were, just kind of transitioning from our relationship with big UK publishers, Longman and so on, who were very active in this space. And our founder, Shirley Kirby, actually, along with others, like, I don't want to go into names and omit anyone, but the fact of the matter is they did a lot of work setting up an indigenous publishing culture and laying the foundations for publishers, booksellers, etc., to shape their own identity according to our cultural space, both in Jamaica and in the wider Caribbean. So you would find coming out of that period a lot of national publishing houses and businesses to where we are today, which is seeing us on the cusp of another kind of transition in terms of business and a lot of things. So in our space, I would say that women are generally well represented, but like so many other places in the world, there is still a lot to be done in terms of things like equal work, equal pay. Um, there is the whole matter of having women, a lot of women in middle management, but in terms of the very top positions, still, working towards having women have a fair chance at playing those leadership roles as well.
Interesting. And you touched a little bit about the indigenous publishing, because it's quite
Yes.
interesting the transition you took from, UK-based publishers to having your own local publishing industry
Mm-hmm.
that is reflective of your culture and the
Yes.
people there. So tell me a little bit about that. And I'm sure, that's made a huge difference in terms of the economy, cultural identity, and many other things.
Well, the truth is, we are nowhere near where we want to be, especially on the economic front. We still have a lot of work to do in terms of developing the kind of ecosystem that we see existing in other places where there's a lot more structure. So, when a book comes to life in the form of an idea or it actually is published, you know, the support systems that go around that. Traditionally, we're a very big textbook market. Though we have produced some of the world's best writers, but what we've had is a lot of those writers have reaped the success moving outside of this space. And it has its pros and cons because it's easier to tell stories about home sometimes when you're outside of the space and looking back at it. But then there is the business side of it, where we are now actively looking to develop the industry beyond, where we're at now, to enable an author or a writer or a publisher or the other players in the market to stay right here in Jamaica or right here in the Caribbean and to reap not only the literary recognition, but the economic success in terms of what comes with a book that sells thousands of copies or is marketed well, in that respect. But I would say that we have done significant work in terms of developing materials that are culturally relevant. That, for example, I'm very passionate about young people and children, so I tend to, bring the discussions back there. But in that regard, we now have publications where young people are able to look in the books and see themselves, both in terms of the stories that are told and literally in terms of the representation with things like illustrations, just how the environment is portrayed. It's something that they can identify with. And so I think that we have done a lot of work and achieved a lot in terms of creating that balance. So now it is the whole matter of the economic side of things, building out the industry in that way that we can have more successful stories at home, not just in terms of the recognition, but in terms of the business.
Okay, so Latoya, tell us a little bit about the situation in Jamaica. We're all easing out right now of lockdown and quarantine, and we've all been under a lot of difficulties in our publishing industry. We'd love to know what it was like in Jamaica for yourself and for the publishing industry in general.
Well, it was, I think the very first point to start with is that a pandemic, I don't think most of us who are alive at this time would have experienced a pandemic before. And so just starting there in terms of the shared human experience, it was, you know, something that came with a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty. And from the health side, we have a big diaspora in places like the US and the UK. So you had people being impacted on a personal level in terms of family members and not necessarily being well, and the emotional and mental health issues that come with that. So beyond that, though, Jamaica, though punching above its weight in the world in terms of our name and all of that, we're a very small island. And so when things like this happen, the scale of the impact tends to, be greater in some sense than maybe in other spaces. And so what we found is that in the beginning, we definitely, from the economic side, we had things to contend with, like almost a sudden halt to our tourism sector, which impacts every aspect of life. It contributes, it's one of the main contributors to our GDP. Then looking at our industry, as in the book industry, what we found right away, we were very early in terms of our government to issue directives where it concerns closing down businesses. So I think we had our first case of coronavirus in Jamaica on March 10th, and shortly after, we had a directive from the government in terms of business operations. So quite a few places, including bookstores, etc., would have been impacted right away by that. We also had schools closing very early. We were very early to close our schools because certainly we wouldn't want our children to be impacted negatively. What we've found since then, I mean, we never went on total lockdown. So what a lot of businesses did was pivot in terms of focusing on digital. And that's one of the positives that has come out of, the whole situation, in that there has been a lot of innovation in terms of connecting with clients, customers, serving the industry still, in spite of, the limitations based on the public health guidance. We have one member in particular who has been working with our local Ministry of Education. Well, several of our members have been, but in terms of providing digital access to educational materials, we've had one of our members work very closely with the Ministry of Education to ensure that children, well outside of our capital city, were able to access what they needed for learning. Uh, we as an industry also sought to, work with our members to support communities and particularly children and young people. So we worked with a nonprofit called Fight for Peace, which does violence prevention work, and we partnered with them to deliver bibliotherapy to over 60 children across 3 very vulnerable communities via a virtual book club. And our virtual book club was very successful to the point where we're now continuing into the summer. So we had, celebrity readings. So we had Sidella Marley read to the children. We had a bookstore owner giving a virtual tour. We had authors coming on and, telling them what it's like to be an author. And we had a illustration and digital storytelling workshop where children were able to create stories and have them illustrated. And then we're going to be publishing those, talking about, their communities and themselves in terms of their whole experience being at home during this time.
That is wonderful. That sounds amazing. And I think, when you're put in a situation and you're limited with what you can do, people get creative, right? They start to think outside the box and they start to come up with some new innovative
Definitely.
ideas.
Definitely.
How has your government responded, Latoya? Has the Jamaican government provided any sort of support for the publishing industry?
Well, at this point in time, the answer to that in a direct way is no, right? And I will qualify it by saying that the publishing industry falls under the creative industries umbrella. And in that regard, we have had discussions with our government through our Ministry of Culture, which has been very supportive in terms of, facilitating discussions with us as members of the creative industries. And, members were encouraged. Our government has rolled out a national plan through a platform called We Care, where it's targeting, different sectors of society. They had a big package for tourism because clearly that's one of our major earners and a lot of people were displaced. Then they had different subcategories, and some of our members have benefited under that line of assistance in terms of applying as individuals who are registered as a part of the creative registry and recognized as individuals operating in the sector. However, and we have continued to work with our Ministry of Education. However, in terms of a specific line of assistance to publishing, we have not had that. And that's why my answer is no. What we are now positioning ourselves to do is we're doing wide consultations with our members. So we had a meeting with our Ministry of Education recently, and coming out of that meeting, they have said these are specific programs that we are in the process of working through the details that we would either like you to help us as content providers or, so it's that kind of assistance in terms of ensuring that for members who might have been disrupted at different levels, because we have bigger players, we have smaller members of the sector, trying to see how we can work together to still have business going. But we are now in the process of formulating specific asks from the government in terms of things that we are now sure we will need to support us coming out of this crisis. And the thing is, we understand our context. The resources are very limited in our setting. And as I said, right now the government is facing a major fallout in terms of the economy because tourism, we have been so dependent on tourism. The need for diversity has always been there, but it's now squarely on the table. And I believe that industries like ours will play a major role, and we have already started in supporting the economic recovery, but we're going to need assistance. So one of the things I can think of right now is we have a lot of members who will need retooling in order to meet the new digital demands that exist. There are some companies who might have been better prepared for it, but I know that some of our members definitely will need some strategic support in that area. It's also very difficult to access lines of finance or access to finance for women-owned businesses and also for people who are entrepreneurs, especially in non-traditional areas. So in terms of, financial support, we will need a lot of the red tape that exists to be revisited, so we can, try to really help people in the way that they need. We look on at spaces like the UK where, there are all these grants, and so on coming out, but we know that that funding comes out of a particular context, which we don't have.
I know a lot of countries are struggling with that, and it's difficult to find funding in terms for the publishing industry specifically when everything else is also falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
Have any events been canceled? So I know you have the Kingston Book Fair
Yes.
annually. Has that been canceled this year?
So we have regionally, I mean, what has been the trend is that we've had quite a few festivals and major public events canceled. As an industry, we believe that it was very important to set a proper example in terms of balancing out the need for profits and engagement and our general plan with public health advice and the well-being of people. And we have monitored the space both regionally and internationally, and we took the decision that we are definitely not going to be moving ahead with an in-person staging of the Kingston Book Festival, which is a major event where thousands of people attend the different events, especially the book fair. And we just didn't think it would be safe, even with the measures about masks and social distancing. I don't think you have been to this, where you have been to Jamaica,
No.
but and I hope to change that in the future when it's safe. But we definitely have challenges with heat, and it just makes everything very complicated. And so we just didn't think that it would be a good idea. But what we are exploring, certainly like many other festivals, is to see how we can still keep the engagement in terms of some virtual edition, and we'll be making an announcement on that by summer. The festival was planned for November as a part of the Kingston International Festival, which would be multidisciplinary. So we would be the literary arm. And so we're looking at a program that will keep everyone safe, but also keep the focus on the work that we're doing as an industry, and just supporting people in terms of having some fun and mental relief.
Yeah, I think that's important. And as much as I hear all of the cancellations and the postponements of the events, has anything positive come out of this for you personally or professionally?
I would say I would definitely say yes. I would say one of the highlights for me personally was to date has been that project with the children in West Kingston, uh, because it demonstrated to me just the resilience of our spirit. And when we come together to do good, you know, just the unintended or unexpected, you know, positive benefits that come from it. And just to see that in spite of everything, children were still excited, you know. I know a lot of us have been worn out by the Zoom calls and for work and so on, but they are genuinely excited to meet authors, to talk to publishers, to be read to just talk, you know, and that bibliotherapy does work, that books still have that magic, even if it's not in person. That was personally very gratifying for me. I also think that, you know, as an industry, what this pandemic has done is it caused us to pause for a bit and to just really look back at how we do what we do and why we do it. And I think that was very important. And maybe it's a pause that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And coming out of it, I'm seeing where a lot of businesses are becoming stronger. Unfortunately, some businesses will, you know, be not as strong and perhaps have more negative consequences, but we are trying to see how best we can support those entities. We have our own limitations, but in any way, so we have a trade show coming up in a few that's normally an in-person event, and the trade show is all about sharing best practices, talking about things that are new and helping people to network. And we're hoping that that will, you know, also provide some support. But I would say that overall, the positive for me is just to look at how we can deepen collaboration, how we overcome challenges in spite of, and you know, as I said, just the fact that books in any form or reading is still that spark of hope for us.
Interesting. It is definitely a spark of hope. And Latoya, you were invited by the IPA last year to take part in a WIPO seminar in Santo
Mm-hmm.
Domingo. Can you tell us a little bit, what did you learn in that experience?
Well, that experience was, it was definitely one that we value. I personally value, and thanks to the team, it touched on a major topic, and it was our first time attending a regional meeting as members of IPA. So that was a landmark. And then the whole matter of copyright is one that has always been important, but it is increasingly important in this space where we're now talking about the use of technology in publishing and different sectors of the industry, and how we will have to, you know, as an industry, ensure that we're aligned on, you know, what we want and how people should be operating. At that meeting, it was also important to understand the issues that were happening beyond our country and our region. And so, you know, engaging with Latin American counterparts, we understood that we have shared issues, but we also have very different realities. Jamaica has done quite a bit through JIPO, that's our intellectual property office locally, and other entities. We have done a lot in terms of our copyright legislative framework, which is quite strong and an example in terms of the region. Um, so it was just in terms of the experience overall, it was good exposure. It was good to be able to have our voices represented at that international level with, you know, several countries and organizations there. So I think that right away, I mean, we saw the benefit of becoming members of IPA in the very short term, just through that experience.
That's wonderful to hear. And I mean, I have one last question for you. I mean, this
Sure.
interview is so interesting. I don't want it to end.
Same.
But unfortunately, you know, we'll have to wrap it up soon. But in IPA, we value all our members, and
Mhm.
especially our new members who have just joined, and we really want to show our support to new members. So please let us know how IPA can support Caribbean publishers in the future.
Well, I would say that, I'm very interested in the whole matter of exploring partnerships, practical partnerships. So beyond seeing each other at meetings and, having that kind of engagement and attending the very, for example, we enjoyed the Educational Publishers Forum held recently. That was very good experience, a lot of very good content coming out of that. But we would love to deepen our working relationship with other members. We're very open to things like audience building, finding new sources of funding, and not funding in terms of us exploiting, but seeing how we can achieve shared goals, in spite of where we are. So if there are people who are focusing on children, youth, indigenous publishing, different things, marketing, whatever. We definitely need to access new markets, especially coming out of this experience, where we're going to have to help members to build up their economic resilience. New markets is something that we're very open to. But, those are just some of the practical ways. Beyond that, we currently value a lot in terms of just the knowledge that IPA shares, the work that they do in terms of surveys, research, sharing best practices. I think those are extremely valuable.
That's wonderful to hear, Latoya. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. You're a trailblazer in the industry, and we're so
And
proud
so
to
are
have you.
you.
We're so proud to have you with us at IPA. It's really wonderful, and I hope everybody enjoyed this interview. Stay tuned for more interviews coming up on the IPA website, IPA in Conversation With. We've got lots of other speakers coming up, so please keep up to date with our latest videos. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.